Thank you, Loris, and thank you, Toby State, for having me here tonight. I want to thank all of you first for coming. I could be up there, but I'd rather be down here, and I'd just rather be walking around because this is a large crowd, and I'd rather have a conversation tonight and not just be over there trying to tell you about coffee. I'd rather be asking you, and I'd rather be having a conversation again about something that is what we do all day, and it's what we love, and it's a product so noble, and it's a product so complicated, and it's something that's been going on for centuries. And some of us that have been in this business for a short time of years think that it's all new and that we're shaping up this industry. But no, this is an industry and this is a product that has been traded for the last almost 1,500 years. So we're not talking about something that is new. We're talking about something that, has been going on for centuries. So before I get started, I would really like to understand who's here tonight and, what is this crowd comprised of? How many of you all are baristas? How many of you all are roasters? And so that it's going to make it a little more, again, conversational, because I'm not here to teach you anything. I'm just here to talk about coffee. So could I get a raise of hands, or could I get, I want to understand again who's the crowd and who are we with. So how many of you have been in this industry for longer than 10 years? Okay. How many of you are baristas? All right. And how many of you are just enthusiasts about coffee? Any roasters? That is, cool. From what I see around, the average age must be a little younger than me. So I'm actually one of the oldest in this room, which is not common. So that is super cool. I'm very glad to see that the Sydney coffee scene is so young, because that is not how the rest of the world is about coffee. Because in coffee, especially at our origin, the average age, if I had the industry sitting down over here at my country, it would be completely different. And that's part of the things that I'm going to be talking about tonight. I will be engaging, and I will be, again, not up there but here, because you just had dinner, you've been drinking, and I don't want you to fall asleep tonight with me. So again, it was very important for me to understand who are we with, and let me get started here to talk, if I can get this clicker working. So as Loris said, my name is Emilio Lopez Diaz, and I guess I've been in this industry for about 20 years. And I run a vertically integrated operation. I'm based out of El Salvador. That's where I'm originally from. But I do have businesses in different parts of the world. I've been working in Australia or with Australian roasters for about 10 years now. And I'm supposed to introduce this talk to talk about myself. And I could go back to my picture there and start talking about myself, but I'd rather tonight start talking about myself with a drawing over here. So this illustration over here is a custom drawn drawing of what I am and who I am. So this is what I've been doing for the last 20 years. I come from a culture that is from El Salvador, and we in El Salvador have a civilization, or are part of a civilization called the Mayans. And the Mayans used to build structures that look like pyramids, like many other parts of the world, and that we care a lot about what's below us, and that's the earth, and that's what is green, and that's what gives life. And we build structures up vertically because we also venerate and we admire what's on top. And that's, the base of what I do. I'm part of this pyramid because that's my culture. But at the same time, I'm part of this whole world. And if you see in the center, that is what I breathe and that is what I am. And that's right there. That being is what we all love in this world. And we're here because we want to learn about that being. And that is what motivates us, and that's what that's what makes us, get up every day. And if you see around that bean, that map over there, who knows what that is? Is that El Salvador? Anyone wants to take a guess on what that map is? That is a country for you to see. Anyone? That's Ethiopia. That is where Arabica coffee comes from, right? So that bean is in that country or in that piece of land that is Ethiopia. And that is the world right there. And around that globe, we have different flags and different icons. The first that I want to talk about is this one over here, and that is the United States, and that is where I actually went to college. And that bridge is in Portland, Oregon. That bridge is called the St. John's Bridge. And that is very important for me to represent in this image because that is actually where I got obsessed about coffee. I knew growing up that I was part and I was a 7th generation coffee farmer. But that didn't mean anything to me back then because that's just where I was born, Yes, my grandparents and my great-great-great-great-grandparents have been growing coffee since 1840, and I'm a 7th generation direct farming the same lands, doing the same thing that everyone. But it was until I went to that place that I realized, wow, I have something that is special to some people. And that's where I actually got started in coffee. I wanted to be a microbrewer because Portland, Oregon, back then, when I was studying there in 2000, from 97 to 2001, it was the microbrewery city or capital of the world. But also craft roasting started back then. So that's where I got engaged. So that's where my coffee career began in Portland, Oregon. I started importing roasted coffee as a student back then, and that motivated me because I had something that I had grown in my own land, and now a lot of people liked what I produced, and they admired, and it was something cool, and it was a craft product that I was vertically integrated, and we're talking 20 years ago. That was not normal back then. Big importers, big roasters, there comes a Salvadoran student bringing a coffee that, it was small little batches that I was roasting at home. And I was somehow able to convince people to try it out and believe me and believe in me. So Portland, again, represents a big deal to me. I also have now an importing company there that is called Odyssey Coffee. So I run a business out of Portland, Oregon, where we now not just import coffee to the US and distribute it there to roasters, but we have consolidated a lot of our imports and exports throughout the world from that city. The next flag that we see up here is Brazil. And I know there's a few Brazilians in the crowd, and I have to say that my first coffee trip was to Brazil, and that's why it's over there, because Brazil represents a big, big part of my coffee career and big part of my coffee admiration in my history doing coffee. Brazil, the first time that I went there was in 2006. for some of you that have traveled to origin before, especially in Latin America, in Africa, and Asia, coffee is a synonymous for you that you're more barista and you see on a day-to-day basis the consumer. But for you to understand, except in Brazil, coffee around the world where it's grown, coffee is synonymous of poverty. Okay? For some of you that have never traveled to origin, those two words are synonymous. Coffee around the world where it's grown means poverty. Okay? When I went to Brazil, that was a whole different game changer for me because coffee did not mean poverty. Coffee meant development. Coffee meant equipment. Coffee meant young people. Where I come from is completely the opposite. Okay? So Brazil marked a big change to my career, to the point now that I actually own a farm there because I want to somehow bring some of that knowledge back home and have that as an example of, okay, this is what the coffee scene should look like because this means development. Then, if you see over here as well, there's another country or another part of the world that is France, and that's Europe at the same time. We have partnered up very early in my career as well with a French company over there based out of Bordeaux. So I get to drink a lot of good wine throughout the year because I visit there a lot. We partner up with a company over there that helped us bring our coffees through the rest of Europe through Bordeaux. And also, as some of you might know, because you might have heard of a little bit of what I've done in my work, I also met someone very special there that is not here yet, but is from France. I don't know if you all know Charlotte Malabal, but besides importing a lot of our coffees through Bordeaux and through France, I had the pleasure to work with a barista, twice champion of France, and 6th and 5th place in the world barista championship. So I've worked together with her. Oh, she's here. She just got here. Hey, Charlotte. Thank you for coming. Of course. So she's a big part of why I am here. So we've been working together for the last almost 6 years or 5 years. So that's why that is also part of that. I didn't make this drawing because I was coming to Australia. That's the same as I was saying. This is something that I drew and I helped. This is a custom drawing, as you will see. There's more than one because this describes me. Also, another one of these flags over here, another one of these countries, is Australia. Australia, has marked something very, very, very special for me because. So let me tell you the story about Australia. I was in El Salvador back in 2010 at the beach, laying in a hammock, swinging in a hammock, and someone texted me. We're talking 9 years ago. Someone texted me and said, "Hey, someone in Australia in the Australian Barista Championship is using your coffee and it's talking about you." So I got online immediately. I clicked on the link. I got online, and there's a barista from Australia using my coffee and talking great things about me, and I didn't even know who this guy was. So there's Craig Simon for the first time in 2010 using my coffee, talking about me and talking about my farm and talking about the process that I had done to this coffee. And that's how my connection to Australia started. So immediately, as soon as he finished, and he didn't win that year, but he won the next year. So I texted him, and immediately, like 2 months later, he's in El Salvador in the same hammock that I was swinging, and we're enjoying the time in El Salvador. So that's how I started to work in coffee in Australia. And then, obviously, that was 10 years ago, and now I have other relationships over here, and this is my third time in Australia. I had only been in Melbourne and in Sydney. Yesterday I had the pleasure to be in Brisbane. I'm going to Perth as well next week. So Australia means a big ton for me, and I've learned throughout the years, and I understand what you all go through and how competitive this market is and how saturated this market is. And again, that is also a reason that I'm here tonight. The other culture that is here that means a big deal to me, and that is there, if you see here, it is there in the background. Just like it doesn't have a flag, but it has a lot of meaning in my career. It is the Asian culture. It was always there in the back of my mind. I've been in this business for 20 years. I have a lot of respect for that culture and that destination for my business and my personal life. But all this time, it was always there in the back. And I knew if I wanted to reach that market, I needed to plan very well because it's big and it's because it's almost a third of the world living there. And I knew that if I wanted my coffees to reach the Asian market, I needed to do certain things right. And one of the things that I needed to do right, if I wanted the best roaster and the best customers in Japan, I needed to accomplish something. And that something was an event or a competition called Cup of Excellence. So you might have seen part of the promotion for this talk was, oh, this guy has won first and second place Cup of Excellence last year. That wasn't coincidence. I planned that for almost 19 years. I knew if I wanted to go to the Asian market and to have the best roasters over there to buy my product, I needed to win Cup of Excellence. So I prepared 19 years for that. I only submitted one sample in 2006. I didn't unfortunately win, but I knew that had to happen. And yes, I submitted a couple of samples last year for COE, and I won first and second place. And I finally reached that market, and I did, and I feel very proud that I do have great customers there. So Asia is there now. And then up here, this is the most iconic figure in my country. That is, we were conquered by the Spaniards back in the 1500s, and until like 1800s, we got our independence. This represents Jesus Christ. I don't feel like Jesus Christ, but that's the most iconic figure in my country. I do sometimes feel like this guy up here, like around the world, trying to share the product that we are, again, here in the middle, all passionate about, and that I'm able to somehow be there in the middle, sharing with you all my story, but not only my story, but the story of this little being that drives us all crazy and that gets us to work every day. And that not only gets us to work, but gets everyone around us to work and gets us so passionate. So yes, I sometimes feel like that guy up there raising their hand or raising his hand saying, I got something very special to share with you all. So again, I could have shown a picture of myself up there. I rather explain what I do with images and drawings. This is a drawing that was custom made for me. So today's talk. So today's conversation pretty much is going to be focused. I was told to only talk for an hour, but yesterday it took me like 2 hours, and I made it a little conversational and engaging. So I hope, again, we just had dinner. I'm not going to bore you. I promise. So today we're going to talk a little bit of coffee and its historical context. We're going to talk about also the challenges of coffee at origin. I'm going to talk a little bit about how could you add value, or what kind of value is it added to coffee at the milling step or stage in the processing of coffee. I'm also going to talk a little bit, you are the ones that are established in this market, but I will talk about the competitiveness at the roasting level and what you go through, because I have seen it. And I not only work in Australia, but I also work and I have been around the block in the US, Europe, Asia, and other markets. And I do see how saturated those markets are. And I've seen what other companies have done to differentiate themselves. So we'll be talking about how competitive that market is for roasters. We'll be also talking about retail and how now, is it really about who prepares the best espresso, or is it about who has the best location? And not only the best location, but is it about retail, or is it about real estate nowadays with the shops that we've been seeing around when they come to our towns and they come to compete with us? We thought we had something special, but the special thing now is the biggest store, or it's the store that is mostly talked about. So we're talking about retail as well. And then the biggest topic nowadays is how sustainable our business is, and how could we plan for the future, and how could we make our business last longer? Because again, we want coffee, and we want our businesses to run for more than just what we have going on right now. That is a picture of my office, actually. All the pictures that you will see and all the drawings are, connected to me and connected to the place that I work at. That's my office. That's where I go almost every day. And that's the deck from our farm. And that's the view that I get every day from our farm. That farm is called El Manzano. So let's get started here and talk a little bit about coffee and how did we get to where we're at. For some of you, again, that are new to this industry, coffee has been going on, and the trade of coffee has been going on since the 500s. So Arabica coffee is from this country over here that is Ethiopia, right? And the first time coffee was taken out of Ethiopia was to Yemen. The Arabs controlled the world pretty much back then, and they took this product and planted it in this country called Yemen, and not only planted it, but also started trading that coffee around the world, because they dominated the world back then. And that's the first time coffee got out of Ethiopia. So it went to Yemen first. So this happened from the 500 to 1500 AC, okay? So obviously wars and empires and who ruled the world. Then the Europeans came. It wasn't the Arabs anymore. It came the Europeans, and around 1600 AC, the Dutch got a hold of this magical bean, and they brought it first. Well, they tasted it, obviously, and they saw that this thing was something of a ritual, and it was something that connected people, and that if you consumed it, you get energized, and you were able to tell big stories about it. And that's how stories and that's how cultures, and that's how families communicated around coffee. And so they brought that product, first of all, to reproduce it in their nurseries back in Europe, and easily, because the Dutch and the Europeans control the world, not the Arabs anymore, they started bringing them, or those beans and plants, to the rest of their colonies and through the rest of the world. So the first were the Dutch that brought it to India, Indonesia, and Ceylon, and all those colonies of theirs. But also the French. The French also took advantage of their colonies and their power, and they brought it to their nurseries. And again, they started spreading it to the Reunion Island, and then also the Spaniards got a hold of this big chunk of land over here called Latin America, and they started also spreading those seeds, and all of a sudden, in about 500 years, the whole world pretty much is planted with coffee. Right? Any questions so far? I don't want this to be a monologue. Questions so far? No? So that's how coffee got spread around the world. And over here, if you see, some of you might have a hard time seeing from down back there, it says that in Central America, coffee got brought in from 1750 all the way to 1850. My family started growing coffee in El Salvador around the year of 1840. So they had land already, and in 1840, they started to plant coffee. Nowadays, I'm managing and I'm farming the same land that they were farming back in 1840. So again, that's a little bit of the background that I have. And yes, that's where I come from. But what I've done in the last few years is actually what has gotten me here. I don't only talk about the past, but also I'm very proud of what I've done in the last few years. So, the historical context of coffee, it sounds good that it got spread around the world. But in order for us to understand where we're at right now, it's very interesting and very important to know, why are we where we're at? Because, so originally, coffee got spread throughout the world through the European colonies. And that might be a nice romantic story that coffee got throughout the world. But in reality, that's a very patriarchal story. The Europeans invaded the world and invaded these kind of countries, and coffee was forced into our cultures and was forced into our people. And that's how originally got started. I'm not making anything up. That's how it got started. So, because back then as well, the context was a little bit different, for centuries, slaves were the ones working coffee. So again, it's hard to talk about this, but that's the reality. And that to understand where we're at, we need to understand how did it get so widely spread around the world. Because it was so cheap and it was so easy to force into, it was mainly worked by slaves, right? But then, obviously, slavery got abolished around the world, and then the coffee land and coffee got in the hands of the rich. You couldn't own slaves anymore, but you could own land. And the people in charge of this business now, mainly, was the rich people. But it wasn't until the 30s and 40s that this rich people that dominated the world now got a pretty good hit from an event that is called the Great Depression. And the Great Depression is an economic event that we might have heard of that hit the world and took away the privileges that the rich had around the world. And now there was the opportunity of some of the people that were working in those fields that knew about coffee. So somehow the rich lost control of the land, and somehow those workers were able to afford and buy some of that land. And this is not a story. I own a farm in Brazil where pretty much 360 degrees around the farm, I have neighbors that are from Italian origin, are from Spanish origin, German origin, that back then they were employees of these rich people, and at that time in the 30s and 40s, they were able to afford to buy the land from these people that went broke. And that not only happened in Brazil, it happened around the world. Okay? Also, another thing that happened is that there were agrarian reforms around the world. Agrarian reforms means that the government now takes away the land from the rich and gives it to the workers. So Latin America, Africa, Asia has been going through a lot of changes. So the land now is not only owned by the rich. Nowadays, average size of a farm around the world is between 1 and 5 hectares. And we might have heard that in Brazil, in some places, huge estates exist. But no, around the world, the medium or the average farmer has between 1 and 5 hectares of land. And that is where we're at right now. So now the coffee is in the hands of the people, small farmers. Those are the ones who own those lands. That's where we're at right now. And yes, you might be getting coffee from a large state, but in the majority of cases, it's the small farmer who is owning that land. So a little bit of historical background of where did coffee come, or where does coffee come from, and where is it now? So another one of those drawings, and this means a lot as well. So this lady over here, she's worked in the coffee industry or in the coffee fields for about 80 years, right? And she's tired. She's been, she's been working and she's been raising her kids, and she's a single mom, and her hands are what has gotten her where she's at. Picking coffee, working the fields, knowing as well that her hands make this plant transform from flour to beans to ripe fruit to parchment, through roasted coffee to ground, and then to the cup. Because hands is what make up this business. Right? Yes, we might find that espresso machines transform the ground or the whole bean into the ground and then to the liquid, but it's hand processing. The reason that she's there as well, that almost is the average age of people in coffee where I come from. I'm super surprised about this group. The average age in this group is probably 41, my age. But where I come from, if you go to a farm field, her or she represents the group. Right? That's why she's there over there. So what are the challenges at origin? So first of all, workers at origin are old and they're tired. Right? And if you look at her, a lot of them look like that. They're tired. They need motivation. They need some sort of hope. It might, the coffee industry on this side of the world might be just getting started and like we're very passionate about it. But over there, things are a little bit different. There has not been a generational change already. It's still about to happen. And it hasn't happened. Why? Because there isn't an incentive to go to a coffee farm and work your butt off. Why? Because they're not attractive to the new generation. And sorry to be giving you a load of information right now about how reality is at origin, but this is reality. Coffee right now provides the lowest wages in agriculture around the world. There is no other agricultural product around the world that pays lower than coffee. Right now, coffee is the lowest wage in agriculture around the world that you can find. So if it is the lowest wage, how could we motivate young people to go to a farm field? Yeah, please come, and yeah, this is such a good product, but you're going to earn the least amount of money. That's no motivation to anyone. So who will get the job done? Right? If you go to a farm field right now, there's no young people. Especially because the little kids that used to go with their parents are completely banned from stepping their foot into a farm because it's so demonized around the world to have kids around farm fields that they're even scared of stepping into a farm. Obviously, it's not all negative. You know, there needs to be positive around this. And yes, you know, there is optimism. But before we start talking about optimism, there's other problems. And one of the biggest problems that we have as well, besides labor, is climate change and pests. Right? So pests, I don't know if you know what rust is. Has anyone ever heard about that word, rust? Coffee rust? Coffee leaf rust? So pests are taking over coffee fields around the world, especially in Central America over the last 5 years. And there's two options right now. You either go and combat that pest, or you plant certain varieties that are resistant to that pest, and you sacrifice a little bit of quality. Those are the two options. At the same time, because productivity has gone so low, there is a thing called immigration. Let's talk about my country. El Salvador currently is the smallest country, or not currently, it's the smallest country in Latin America. We have 7 million people living there. But to tell you something, there's 3.5 million Salvadorans living overseas. They migrated because there's no opportunities in my country, because agriculture used to be the main source of labor, and now it's gone because things like coffee are not profitable. They left. Out of those 3.5 million people living overseas, 2.7 million live in the United States, immigrated illegally. Right? So immigration is a big factor here, because even if we go back to productivity, who's going to be working at the farm? Those people are gone. But the thing is climate change and pests a new thing? Can we think back into history? Have we ever been with climate change and pest attacks in history before? Is this something new? Is coffee the one thing that changed everything? Have we ever heard in history that climate has changed and that pests take over fields of crops? No, right? Climate change has been changing, or climate has been changing ever since we have memory and ever since we started writing history. This is one thing that's been always happening. And pests, whether that was locusts or whatever you want to think about, it's always been there. And we as a civilization have been very smart and very adaptable to change the way that we grow things and we plant and we do agriculture, and we've been very successful at it. Yes, this right here might look scary. Wow, immigration. Wow, Exodus. Exodus? Yeah. This has happened many times in history. And this, pests, rust, that's nothing new. We just got to be smart about it. And we just got to think what we're doing and be farmers. The thing, and I wish it was only about labor, and I wish it was only about pests, and I wish it was only about climate change, but no, there's another factor that is affecting coffee production around the world, and this is price. Because since about 120 years ago, again, coffee trading has been going on for the last 1,500 years. But this is something new in general. For 120 years, the price of the product that we as farmers grow is determined by a world exchange, right? So there is a New York Stock Exchange and a London Stock Exchange and a Brazilian Stock Exchange that determine what our product is worth around the world. For you to know, nowadays, coffee around the world is determined to be or to have a price of $1.10 per pound, which is about $2.25 per kilo for commercial coffee. So if you're a roaster right now and you want to buy commercial coffee, you could buy it at $2.25 per kilo. The thing is that most of us here are in the specialty industry and care about where our product is coming from, and we're not convinced about buying just commercial coffee. We want something a little better. But to understand what we should be paying, we need to understand what it costs, right? So in average, I've traveled through many countries, and I own a farm in El Salvador, or a few farms in El Salvador, and I also own a farm in Brazil. The average cost around the world to only produce coffee is about $1 and $1.50 per pound. So that means between $2.20 and $3.50 US dollars per kilo to only produce coffee. At the same time as well, you need to process it. That means depulp it, that means export it, bag it, and have indirect cost and overhead. So in general, coffee nowadays is about $2 per pound to produce and process. So at the gate X warehouse, coffee has a cost of about $2 per kilo, which is about $4.50 per kilo. Sorry, per pound, $2 per pound, about $4.50 per kilo. That is the cost of the product that you, or that commercial coffee that's what the cost is. The thing is that, again, some of us are very fortunate to have had an education. We are very fortunate to have traveled around the world and seen other countries, and that we are very fortunate to have direct relationship with the roaster. But the thing that is that 80% of the world coffee producers don't have that opportunity. And nowadays, 80% of the world coffee producers get paid $1.10 per pound. That is the reality of coffee producers around the world today. So, what could we do, and what options do farmers have? And again, when I went to Brazil the first time in 2006, the first thing that I saw is that coffee did not mean poverty. Why? Because farms look like that. And I'm not here to show you bad pictures about poverty around the world. I'm here to show you as the reality of things, and I'm here to be positive, not negative. I gave you a negative introduction. But what I have seen around the world and how I see the future of coffee, it looks something like this, where there is technology, there is efficiency, and there is good wages, or there are good wages. Because nowadays, again, coffee means poverty, low wages, the lowest there is in agriculture. So could mechanization be a solution for the coffee crisis that we have nowadays? And this is not an easy answer because, as I saw in this group, a lot of people raised their hands when I asked how many baristas are there in the room and how many roasters. The majority of us are baristas and roasters. And the thing that we've been preaching for the last 10 years or 20 years since the specialty coffee movement came along was that, oh, this is so romantic, that is a handcraft, and this is so romantic that we do everything shade grown, and we do this thing because we're certified organic and we're certified fair trade, and this is so something that we don't use machines to dry coffee, we don't use machines to grow coffee. Everything is handmade. What we've been doing is condemning our people that are at origin to have the lowest wages and the lowest opportunities that there are there, because that is part of the reality. Countries like Australia, countries like in Europe, countries like the US came out of poverty and came out of underdevelopment because they invested in this, in technology and development, education. What has happened to Latin America? What has happened to Asia? What has happened to Africa? And this is part of that problem. We want things to remain the same. We feel so good about talking, oh yeah, look at this picture of my origin travel. And our customers either feel bad of seeing a picture with kids around there and poverty, and oh yeah, I want to pay a little more. No, it's not about feeling bad about something. The big thing is, how do we make that look sexy? How do we make that something that is appealing for some of our customers? We have not done a good job in the last 20 years to convince people that this is development. So, what could mechanization bring? What could development bring? Again, if I showed this picture to a barista, if I showed that picture to a regular specialty coffee consumer, oh no, that's part of the big companies. That's Brazil. Brazil consumes or produces low quality. That is not Brazil. That is my farm in El Salvador. That guy driving that tractor earns 3 times more than someone kneeling down with a machete, killing weeds. Those people back here know exactly how many grams to feed these trees. They know exactly how this runs because they finally learned how structured we are. They know exactly how to be measured by efficiency. They know that they're able and they're capable of doing this many trees per day, and we are measuring that, and we taught them how to. They also know how to be precise because we gave them a bag of fertilizer or of whatever we give them, and we told them this should last you this much because this land has this many hectares and this has this many trees, and we're being precise about agriculture. At the same time, these people that drive the tractor, that know this, can go to any other industry because they've been working on equipment. A regular farmer or a regular worker in any other farm that has not mechanized their operation goes to another place or a factory to find a work, and they've never done anything other than kneeling down with a machete, and that's all they know. They are condemned to go to find a job somewhere else. The thing and the big question is this marketable? And nowadays, it's not. Because again, we've created this fake story about how beneficial coffee, traditional coffee is, but it's not. So that is the reality of origin. It is very different over here. Here is a different world. Here is about competitiveness. This is about how we can differentiate ourselves. This is about who's got the best quality, which coffee tastes the best. Those are the issues here. You know, who can win competitions and who is the best barista. That is a completely different story than what it is at origin. At origin, you're competing about subsistence. Again, these drawings tell a little bit about my story. I pretty much hire a local artist to draw a little bit of my journey. So all these characters that you see kind of reflect a little bit of who I am and what do I see around coffee. And this is a man that is always looking towards the light, is always looking towards the future, and is always working hard with a product, again, that is very hard to produce, very hard to convince people to understand the meaning of it. But again, it's all about looking forward. And it's all about understanding that there is a past, but the future is what will get us out of that past. So this is parchment. This is how coffee is dried manually. At the same time here, there's machines. You know, these are dryers. Again, our coffee farms at origin, because we're a colonized civilization or country or region, there's always a church or a chapel, warehouses over here. But again, that is the life of a farmer, and that is the life of a coffee worker. Hard labor, and again, most of the times, the lowest wage possible in agriculture. So there are some challenges and there are some realities, and this is actually where I found a lot of the hope. This is a lot of where we can start talking common language in processing. Because I can talk about farming in your country, and we can talk about where coffee comes from and how our civilizations have been working on a farm product, but it's not until I start talking about processing then we can start talking about craft processing and about other industries like wine and about beer and about ciders. That's when we start talking, and that's where we can start getting innovative. So this is a big step of what's been happening in the coffee industry for the last only 10 years. And I'm going to also talk a little bit about how did I get started with processing and where are we now. So first of all, again, I don't want to be a monologue, and I've tried already to ask a few questions. Can someone in the room tell me what are the steps in processing? Ben, could you tell me what are the steps in processing? What goes first?
Well, we can wash the coffee.
Wash the coffee? Is there a mic?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, let me bring you the mic. Okay, what are the steps in processing? Thank you, Ben.
Hello. Well, first we got to wash the coffee. Hopefully we're floating.
Is washing the first one?
Well, we got to pick it.
Okay.
We got to pick it and you know, presumably some kind of sorting process before
Okay.
we depulp it.
Because what we pick is not only the ripe ones. You know, we want to do our best to pick only the ripe ones, but sometimes some of the unripes and some of the defect coffees come along with the good ones. So we need to sort it, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, what else?
Well, we want to depulp it.
Depulp it. We have an option to depulp it or not? Do we have to depulp it?
No, we don't have to depulp
Okay.
it. We could dry it in the fruit.
Okay, who depulps coffee around the world? Traditionally.
Yeah, Colombia is a good example.
Okay,
Someone's
Colombia,
saying
who
Colombia.
else?
I think in Ethiopia, traditionally depulping coffee.
Okay.
In Kenya also.
Do Brazilians depulp coffee traditionally?
No, not so much.
No, right? Brazilians typically do natural process on their coffees.
Absolutely.
Okay? Great. So the thing is now, because we have borrowed some ideas from other industries, we understand as farmers and as millers that we have options to process our coffee. Only 20 years ago, all of Latin America except Brazil used to depulp and wash the coffee. So if you were to buy Salvadorian coffee or Colombian coffee 20 years ago, your only option was fully washed coffee. That is not the case anymore. In my experience, it was in 2003 that I got a visit from two gentlemen from Italy. One of them, he was in his 70s, and the other one was in his 50s. And they told me, oh, you know, I'm a third generation coffee roaster from Italy, from Livorno, and my grandfather used to talk so much things about El Salvador, and my dad used to come here and buy coffee, and their naturals were the best naturals around the world, because they would give me body, they would give me cream on my, or they would give me thickness on my crema. It was chocolatey, it was all these things. But what happened to your country? At one point, when we were not depulping coffee in my country, El Salvador, we were doing naturals. Somehow, all of Latin America started doing fully washed. And it wasn't until 2003 that someone told me, this is not how coffee was processed before. That same day that that guy left, I started doing my first batch of naturals. 2003. That's how I got started with processing coffees differently than what my country had been doing for 100 years. Nice shirt. Sweet. So yeah. But who's in control of this? I had the privilege and I had the honor to host a couple of Italians in 2003 and tell me, hey, there's other ways to process coffee. But nowadays, because it's so easy to travel and it's so easy to communicate, who tells us farmers and millers how to process coffee? It is typically the roasters that are traveling around the world telling, oh yeah, you know, I'm willing to pay $10 more per bag to process it natural, or honey. Do farmers even understand what they're getting into? Do you understand what it means for them to process it differently? It helps us sell it better at the coffee shop. Oh yeah, I have this honey and great things to talk about this coffee. Are we paying what they are worth though? What their cost? Sometimes the answer is no. Is it adding value to the product? Do you think it's adding? If I have the fully washed coffee and now I'm able to do it honey, am I adding value as a farmer? No? Why not? Depends on what? Okay. If you're paid more, am I adding value? Am I adding quality? Could a coffee taste better if I do it natural or honey? I would say sometimes. Am I going to get paid better if I do it natural or honey? If I am adding value. The thing is that sometimes roasters don't pay more. And to tell you, a coffee that I will do natural, it almost costs double the amount of time, the amount of energy that I put in, the amount of days in the patio, the amount of hours that it has to haul in the hauler. It takes double the effort. Am I getting paid double? Sometimes no. But farmers, they're so desperate to convince you to buy their coffee that they will say, yes, don't worry. I'll process it however you want. So you can tell this story about how cool our coffee is at your coffee shop. The thing is that there's a lot of things that could go wrong. What could go wrong if I process my coffee that I've been, for 150 years I've been doing fully washed, and now you tell me to come and do it natural? What could go wrong? I'm sorry? Coffee gets rotten, right? Let's say Colombia. In Colombia, it rains all year long. I'm very fortunate that in my country, the rainy season is very marked, and once it stops raining, it doesn't rain again for 5 months. I'm very lucky. But some countries that especially face in the Caribbean, it rains all year long. Tell them to do a natural. Sometimes it will ferment, sometimes it will rotten. Who takes the risk on that? The farmer. So it's not an easy request to go tell them. So someone needs to, to face that. So if you're a roaster that goes and travels to origin and asks all this list of favors most of the time, and all this list of requests, you better know that it takes something and that something could go wrong. The thing at the same time, and the thing is here, what's at stake? And what things are changing? What is the reality? We as farmers not only are now told what to process, but also by law, we're now forced to stop using a lot of resources as we used to. Water is scarce, energy is scarce, labor is scarce. There's a lot of labor laws now. So regulations have changed throughout the history of coffee. Coffee mills back in the day, 60 years ago, used to be these monster operations. Now, more and more, things are getting more efficient. Things are getting smaller, because of regulations. Not only economical, political, environmental, and social. So that is what's been happening at the milling side of this business. Please interrupt me if you have any questions. Again, what's up?
So the last part where you mentioned the last part there where you say more regulations and so forth. So does that imply the raise in the cost of production immediately? Is that one of the side effects as well?
Who's been roasting the most in Australia? How long has Toby's been roasting? 20 years? 20? Who else is a roaster? Has regulations changed in this country? Is it more expensive now to roast coffee? You had to get out of the city and have this shop because there's regulations over there, right? Real estate is more expensive now, right? Land in general, labor, of course. And look at, let me go back and talk about that here. Look at this. This starts in 75, right? Sorry to block. Look at the average price right here. If I were to draw a line here, the average coffee price would be probably around $1 per pound. What about inflation? What the hell has been going on? Everything else costs more. Can you buy a car with the same price in 75? Can you buy anything at the same price that you were paying in 75? So there are some things messed up in this industry. And that's what we're here talking about. Doesn't make sense, right? So who gets to decide what to process and why? Is the roaster someone magical and someone mystic to tell you, I want it processed this way? He's the one paying most of the time, right? And it's so trendy. Oh yeah, carbonic fermentation and maceration. And what is all this? Why is it so marketable? Who is asking for this? Was the customer or consumer really asking for all these processes? Have they been asking for that? No? Whose idea was to do all this carbonic thing, and whose idea was it? The roaster? Or was it the farmer? A combination of both, right? Do we need it? Does that make us different as roasters and as cafes? What trend do we want to make? Is it benefiting the producer? Are we paying really for that? Most of the time the answer is no. It's a catchy word, it's a trend. Yeah, it's popular now. Who's it benefiting? So who determines how the coffee should be processed? Is that an option for the farmer? If they're able to get a better price for it, yeah, it should be the producer's choice. Does it cost the same? No. It doesn't cost the same. It costs more. Fermentation tank, stainless steel, separation, having a 5-bagger batch around, it doesn't show the full thing, but this is like a 100 bag natural lot compared to this raised beds over here have probably like a 2-bagger batch. Should that cost the same? No. Are we paying the extra cost? What is the cost? The thing is that farmers don't know even what they cost because there's no education at origin, much education. More and more, yeah. So again, those are the things that happen at origin. Farming, processing, and we as roasters and as baristas have been influencing that. But now let's start talking about what's been going on over here. And the story is completely different because here again, it's not about survival. Well, it is now about survival, but it's not about subsistence. It's about creative. How creative we are, how competitive we are. And who are we competing with? And we as roasters have a big chance to be different. And some of us have been in business for 20 years, and the market has changed. 20 years ago, the companies that we run or that we've been running, we had the chance to be very different than the rest. But now there's a lot of pop-up shops and a lot of pop-up roasters that are very good at social media and that are very good in general about being loud and about convincing young consumers to pay more. And they're very cool. And the old companies, are having a hard time catching up. And this is all about being creative and being innovative, right? But what are we doing different? You know, is it only about opening shop? Is it only about serving the same as everyone else is serving? It's not about that, right? So, price-wise, how are we marking ourselves different than the big guys or the small guys? Do we even have a concept of our own as businesses? You know, there's big companies out there that are very successful at marketing themselves as different and marketing themselves as special. And we, most of us here are in the specialty coffee industry, we end up selling at the same price as them. There's only 2 Starbucks that I've seen around Australia, and they're like a few blocks away from the hotel that I'm staying at. I went to a Starbucks because I typically go, to the shop next door, and then they had the same price. You go there, I want a single espresso, and that is $4, and I go to the super specialty coffee next door, and it's $4. Wait, you're telling me that you're special? You're telling me that you sourced that bean yourself? You're telling me that is all this carbonic BS, and you're charging the same as the Starbucks next door? What is so special about you? Tell me. Because if I go to a 2-star or 1-star Michelin restaurant next door to a McDonald's, because Starbucks is McDonald's, I'm paying 10 times more for the meal. But how come you, that you have such an awesome shop, are charging me the same as McDonald's? How does that work? It doesn't make sense, right? Like many things in this industry. So what are we doing wrong? Who's taking advantage of this, do you think? Are we, as specialty coffee industry, are we taking advantage of this whole thing that is, we think that we've created? Oh yeah, direct trade and specialty and all these new processes. Who's really taking advantage of this whole new thing? The large companies, right? Because they can act like we do. And they've been able now to buy smaller companies like ours and do it better than us. What's on our offering list? Really? Are we selling the same thing for the last 20 years? What is new about what we're doing? Can we offer something different? We think we do. Is it really different though? Yeah, we travel around the world sourcing coffee differently. I'm going to ask you something else. Yeah, we've been investing in education. That's most of the specialty coffee industry or specialty coffee companies, that's how they started differentiating themselves. Okay, I'm going to teach my customer how to brew coffee in different ways, and I'm going to show them how to cup. I'm going to open an educational center. Has it been changing for the last 5 years? Or do we have the same labs as 5 years ago? What have we been changing? Really? Or is it the same model that we've been doing for the last 20 years? Or 10 or 5? Are we in constant change? Because the industry is in constant change. Are we as businesses in constant change? And most of the time the answer is no. No, we're very comfortable because we think we have something special. What are the competitive advantages that we as businesses have against the other people around us? We are in one of the most competitive coffee countries around the world. What are we doing different? Because it seems, okay, so if I think of the coffee scene in Australia versus other places, yeah, I gotta say, the quality is better. The way that you guys roast and the way that you guys serve And the way that the environment that there is at the coffee shop is very different than the rest of the world. Yes, you were very creative 10 years ago to have top chefs and top food at your cafes. But now, everyone has that. Right? What is the new thing? That's a constant change that we need to face, and we need to be very creative. So how direct can we be about sourcing coffee, about dealing directly and being direct with the consumer and convince them and teach them and educate them? Have we hit a place where there's nothing else to do? How could we reinvent ourselves? Is it about packaging? Look at this. How many of our companies have been changing packaging in the last 10 years? Or are you really using the same packaging, black and tall? How much change are we doing in packaging? We feel very comfortable, and that is not going to get us anywhere. We need to start getting creative. How many roasters or roasteries? If you look at this picture right here, wow, nice. UG 50 or 60 over here, nice afterburner. How many roasteries nowadays look like that? That's a picture that I took like 10 years ago. How many roasteries look like that nowadays? Every single one of them? What's different about that now? Probably 10 years ago, wow, what a showcase. Wow, yeah. Right? The big question is how saturated your market is. Is the market in Australia saturated with roasters? Yesterday I went to Brisbane and I said, we were talking about how saturated the market is after the talk. And I said, oh, how many roasters are there in town? About 30, I asked? Oh no, there's hundreds. Wow, for a 2.8 million people city, hundreds of roasters? Sounded saturated. Right? What are we doing? Nowadays, the people or the roasters that felt saturated, what are they doing? Is the size of Australia just small enough to really have to go outside of the country and open shop in the US? Because some roasters are doing that. Some of the people that I work with in this country, okay, this is so saturated that I'm going to have to go open shop across the world. Not only in the US, but in Europe. Is it really the problem? We can't think of anything else to be different and convince people to buy my product than to have to cross the whole world and open shop somewhere else. So again, I told you about the problems that we have at Origin. These are the problems that you face on a day-to-day basis. And it has led you even to conclude that the best thing is to open shop across the world because this is so saturated. And you can't do anything else to differentiate yourselves against your competition. How much does it cost to open a roastery in a different country? How much more can you sell somewhere else? This is, besides Finland and besides Sweden and Norway, this probably is one of the countries where coffee is consumed the most. And you're giving up on it? Wow. That's how desperate we get sometimes. Which is fair, though. We want more. And that's how it is. More of the illustrations and more of the drawings. And this is who we're trying to convince. Because the regular consumer of coffee, truly, what do you think they want? Tell me, please. You know, some of you are roasters, and some of you are baristas. Could I get a quick, simple answer? What does the consumer want?
Same every day.
The same every day.
Depends where you are.
Depends where you are.
In the city, it's just cheap and quick.
Cheap and quick. What else? What do you think that consumer wants? Story? Cafe. They just want coffee, right? What does coffee do to that person in that illustration or drawing? Huh? Coffee is something that gives us, besides energy, it takes us somewhere, right? And most of the time, we are just supplying them with something that we believe is so special. We want to convince that person to drink our juice or our liquid and transform their mind. But in reality, they just want something simple. We believe that we know something that they don't as roasters. We think we have something special, and we think we cross the world and source something that is so unique. But in reality, they want consistency, and they want something special. They want something normal, and they just want coffee. So, what are the challenges at retail? And let's think again, let's take a step back and understand where we come from in the coffee industry, right? So, has anyone in this room been to Ethiopia? Ben, I know you have. Yeah, my man over there. Lloyd. So there's 3 of us that have been to Ethiopia here. So coffee in Ethiopia is something that for them is like it's a national heritage. And it's something so unique, and it's so respected, and it's so part of their culture that when they consume coffee, even nowadays, it's a whole ritual. It's a whole activity. For you to know, nowadays, so they prep coffee. They grind it with a wooden stick, and then they also put popcorn around. And coffee started, when they discovered coffee, Kaldi, or if we want to believe in that story, he noticed that his sheep or goats were eating this product that gave him energy. But in reality, what started happening is that people started consuming coffee. It would get them energized as well, and they would start telling stories. And this was a whole ceremony around a product that will gather crowds and that would help as well express themselves, and stories would be told from generations to generations about this product. And so then again, the Arabs came into Ethiopia. They pretty much brought that into their culture, started as well consuming and started as well sharing this product. And then it got to the Europeans. So the Europeans, yes, they also wanted to share stories and also wanted to consume this product around their own. But at the same time, when it got to Europe in the 1700s, this product was shared or was consumed mainly among the elites. Right? When it got to Europe, coffee wasn't just given to the people. It was solely consumed pretty much by the elite. And that gave coffee a position of like, okay, this product is super special. Then, unfortunately, around 1920, 1930, 1940, World War I, World War II, coffee started getting a little cannibalized into instant coffee, into mass production, into just anyone could add water to coffee, and it started changing a little bit how we consume it and how do we sell it. So from being a very ceremonial and a very ritual product, it got then to the elite, and then it got to everyone, right? Until the 90s, where this company over here transformed the way that we consume coffee, right? And for you that don't know what this is a block, this is one whole block, a street block. This is 3-story high store or coffee shop. And this is the reserve in Shanghai of Starbucks, right? So, and I know in Australia, Starbucks unfortunately didn't do a good job, and like because people don't necessarily buy that, but in reality around the world, they've been very successful, right? So somehow, coffee transformed itself from being a ritual to being a business of real estate. Because nowadays, whether we're in Australia or in Sydney, whether we are in El Salvador, whether we are in Brazil, whoever has the best location, whoever has the convincing strategy where the traffic is typically who's going to get the customers convinced to walk in their door. Whoever's the loudest and whoever has got the most charm around their store is going to most likely get the customers to walk in. So our business and the reality of things is that has turned from a ritual to a real estate business, right? Whoever's got the dollars to invest on branding, on location, on real estate is able to convince people. At the same time, from the storytelling, romantic side of coffee, this is a trade product. Whether we want to accept it or not, coffee is a commodity. Coffee is a volume business. We're just a very small niche as the specialty coffee industry, but we're dealing with a beast. And we're dealing with beasts that are our competitors. And if we do not accept that, they're on our next door, they're our next door neighbor, and they're winning the game. Because companies like Starbucks, like Nestle, like many of the big guys have seen what we've done in the specialty coffee industry, and now they started to buy companies that are in that segment, and they have us well on the radar, and they have studied what we do, and they're going after us. They know exactly what makes profit. They know exactly what customers are valuing. They have people studying that, and that's who we're against. Consolidation is the biggest threat that we have in our industry. Whether you're a farmer, whether you're a roaster, whether you're a barista, consolidation is happening as we speak. Especially when you're at $1.10 or dollars per pound, and the ones that are getting the most advantage is the big guys. So again, if there's something that we need to keep in mind is, first of all, again, because it all comes back to the consumer. We're in this business together as farmers, as millers, as exporters, as roasters, as retail baristas. This right here, the big companies have it very well understood. What is that really the customer is looking for? What is that they really want? Look at that cafe right there. Is it that they're looking for? Do they want something elaborate? Do they want this whole experience? Do they want this whole thing? does the customer really looking for something elaborate, or they just want a coffee? Do they want something so simple as this coffee, that the coffee shop that all they get is they just want coffee. They just want an espresso, in and out. Or do they want something really high end? Or is that something that we only believe that they want? And we've created this idea that they're looking for such a high-end product. We've convinced them to want that, but is that really what they are looking for? Or is it the experience? I would say that 15 years ago, all of us, if I asked that same question, what does the regular consumer that walking in your door in a cafe is looking for? Oh yeah, the experience of walking into a coffee shop. They want the coffee, they want the experience of the barista telling them about how they source the coffee and how this is something special. But is that still accurate? Is the customer nowadays wanting an experience when they walk into a coffee shop? Things have changed. Or is it that they just want to come in and out and take out? Is your business strategy looking, as your company, is it really looking and asking these questions? Because if you're not still asking these questions, the big guys are on a day-to-day basis. They have a dozen of people doing this every day, doing surveys and understanding what is that the customers really are willing to pay for and what is it that they want. Do they are really looking for quality? And if they are you charging what quality is worth and what it costs? Or is it just want something unique? Oh, this coffee, this is the only place in the world that I will get it. If you really believe you have something special, is that the only place in the world that they're going to get it? Or next door, they're going to get the same at a different price or the same price? So asking yourself, what is that they really asking for? You ought to be asking that thing yourself every day to be competitive, especially in a city like Sydney or any city in Australia, because it's so competitive out here that if you're not doing this and if you're not having this as a priority, your competitor is going to be knocking on your door. Hey, this store, this is my next store right here. So if you're going to also think about the future, you ought to be thinking about sustainability. And this is another one of the drawings. Because in a way, this product came from, having respect for nature, having respect for a beautiful plant that is called coffee, a little respect about development and agriculture, a little respect of just in general what's sustainable and where are we and where do we want to take this business to. So sustainability nowadays is a major topic about how could we differentiate ourselves. And if I ask you, what are you in your companies doing for sustainability? Some of you might answer, oh yeah, I buy only fair trade coffee. Or no, I source my own coffee. Or no, I have recyclable cups. Is that really sustainable? Are we really talking about the same thing? What is sustainability? And where does sustainability begin and where does it end? What do we really talk or what do we really mean about sustainability? First of all, the first question that we need to ask if we want to start talking about sustainable is sustainable for who? Because if it is sustainability for you, how to be sustainable, yeah, you need to be competitive in your own market. But I told you about the challenges that happen at origin, and that is where your coffee and your product comes from. So you can be very sustainable here recycling your cups. Is that going to make it sustainable for the people that you're buying your coffee from, if it is about a cup, there's major problems where that product comes from. And what could you do to make it sustainable from the very beginning? So sustainable for who? Is it sustainable? When we talk about sustainability, is it about environment? Because, yeah, it could be very sustainable about having a lot of birds and a lot of animals at my farm, but if I, as a farmer, can't even make a living with the product that I produce, how sustainable is that? Not at all. Is it a social sustainability that I need somehow? I'm a roaster around, I'm a roaster in Australia. Do I really need to be caring about how social, sustainable is my supplier in El Salvador or in Brazil, in Venezuela, wherever I am? How long am I going to be in business? Who am I buying my coffee from? And again, who is being sustainable and who is really getting the most of sustainability? If you ask me, these guys right here are making a big, they're taking advantage of the word. Without talking bad about them. But right now, who's being sustainable and who's taking credit about that? It's not the farmer. It's not you. It's about who? Who is it sustainable for? Right? It's a business, right? Can we make sure that it is directly sustainable to the farmer and to the product that we carry every day? Because right now, these names have been around for like 20 years. If we go to origin right now, again, coffee, synonymous to poverty. What have we done to make it more sustainable? Because the question is, for who? For the farmer? No. It's not sustainable. So to wrap this up, I want you to take a few things with you today. First of all, coffee is not a new thing. This has been going on for almost, millennial. This is almost 1,500-year-old trade. Coffee is not something new, and we as baristas and roasters and newcomers haven't not invented anything. The first story that I remember of my family, again, I'm a 7th-generation farmer. The first thing that I remember when I was probably 5 years old or 7, I don't even remember when, is my grandfather telling me on how his parents used to go to Europe or used to go to the United States on the boat with the coffee to deliver their orders. Direct trade is not something new. You might think it is because, social media believes us or makes us believe that this is something new. No, this has been going on for centuries. The earliest memories I have of coffee is my family telling me how they would go on the boat with the load of coffee to deliver it to their customers across the world. So this has been going on for ages. And it's in constant evolution. And if we do not evolve with it, we're lost. So that's the first thing I want you to take away from this talk today. The second thing is that if we do not differentiate ourselves among the rest, whether you're a farmer, whether you're an importer, whether you're a roaster or barista or coffee shop owner, if you do not differentiate yourself from the rest and create your own model and create your own product and really, really are consistent with what you preach, if you're going to have something special, charge for it. Don't tell me that you're special if you're going to be charging the same as Starbucks, which is the McDonald's of coffee. Convince your customer to pay more, double at least. I know it's not easy. I also own coffee shops. I know it's not easy. But believe me, I am a farmer as well, and my coffee does not cost $1.10 per pound. I take the time to convince the consumers or my customers to pay more for what I produce. Because it costs more. Thirdly, sustainability, where does it start? It does not start with the cups. It starts at origin. It starts at origin, and it needs to be an economical, social, environmental, and educational sustainability. You cannot be talking about sustainability if your farmer that you're so engaged with can't even afford to take his kids to school. If you really want to preach about direct trade and all that, make sure that you're sustainable from the very start of the journey of the bean. Sustainability begins at origin. And lastly, again, this is not something new. This is not about, having a product that everyone has. You have to be differentiated, or you got to be, you have to have your own model. Sustainability begins at origin. But the three things I would urge you to go out and make sure you have on your mind on a day-to-day basis. First of all, be unique, be real, and be legit. Because coffee is not like Coca-Cola, or is not like a product that is just a mix of chemicals. It is those three things. Coffee is unique. Coffee is real. It's social, it's a cultural thing, it has a lot of history, and at the same time, it's a product that is legit. Those are your three major weapons against any other product. So I hope I did a good job entertaining you. I hope these takeaways, you remember them, on the next few days. Go back to your businesses, try to make great coffee, try to make people smile about what you serve them, and thank you very much.